Good morning to all of you, and particularly those of you who are in the online version of 801. As I said in my last voice announcement, I wanted to make sure that I gave you the ending presentation I gave your colleagues in the Philadelphia cohort. So this short video basically is going to cover what we went through. So what I want you to think about over the last 30 weeks, starting with 800, then moving into 625, and then finally with 801, and also thinking about 802, your technology, and also I believe you had 804, which dealt with program evaluation. So as you look at this last 30 weeks, the important thing is that these are the core subjects that are related to the essence of what this doctoral program is about, and that is developing your leadership capacity in order to create meaningful learning, whether you are in an educational institution or also within the private sector in a business that's looking at the development of learning communities, or if you work in NGOs or other organizations outside of education. So if you remember, Peter Senge talked about this three-legged stool, and what you basically see is that he talked about core leadership capabilities. And so the first one, which is very important, is this idea of creating. And what he was talking about is that creating brings into reality. And so if you remember when you read in Tim Brown's book, looking at that distinction between innovation and creating something, that creating is just not this nebulous thing that we do just to keep coming up with ideas, that creating brings these ideas into reality. So to one extent, what you've been experiencing over the last 10 weeks is attempting to create a concept of what a new learning environment might be and to bring it into reality. And so what drives that process is this idea of visioning. And visioning is very important to understand because if you remember back in 800, we talked about vision as being both a negative vision or a positive vision. And the important thing here is negative doesn't mean bad or positive means something good, but when any time you see the word anti in front of a concept like anti-bullying, anti-violence, anti-drugs, generally that is a vision that is designed to deal with a problem. And what happens over time many times is that that vision can dissipate very easily because if you remember the idea of structural tension, where you have the vision, you have current reality, and those two are always tugging on each other. The second type of vision, though, which is you could consider the positive vision, is that you're always living in the question of what are we trying to create. So if you link that to Theory U, what you're thinking about there is the concept of what are we letting go to let come in, and that's what we're looking at. So that's the first leg of that stool that you were exploring in the Necessary Revolution and also Schools That Learn. The next level then of the stool is this collaboration across boundaries, that is extremely critical. And I'm hoping that through all your courses, you understand the need to collaborate across boundaries and to break down silos. That becomes extremely important because if you do and you understand that it overcoming fragmentation that we see in our organization so many times. And if those of you remember the video in the MOOC where Otto's talking about that our present structure is set up that we develop certain types of silos that deal with problems. And so we have all these NGOs that form, and they're all focused on their particular problem instead of crossing the boundaries, crossing to share those different approaches as we're attempting to deal with whatever the issues are in relationship to both a positive or a negative vision. So this becomes extremely important to think about. And then that last leg basically is seeing systems. And what seeing systems is about is the ability to overcome the blind spots that we have individually and collectively as an organization. So when you encapsulate the ideas of 800 and then add into Heifetz and Linsky's concept of the dance floor and the balcony, this idea of seeing systems then becomes extremely important. That, yeah, we're always into daily activities, but then it's very important as a leader to get up on the balcony and to look at the total picture, to look at how we collaborate across boundaries, and also begin to think about how the vision is coming into play. So that emerges out of a lot of the thinking that you were exposed to in 800, and related to systems thinking then. If you remember, the iceberg became the metaphor for this. And so we looked at the events, and that's the dance floor. And we talked about this idea of patterns and trends. And what's important about that is what you're looking at is over time, what are the trends that are causing the types of behavior that are taking place? And so the idea of looking at data is very important to analyze, to get a sense of what's going on. But remember, don't get trapped by the data, because the old analysis by paralysis becomes into play. That the more we just focus on the data, it will have a tendency to create a paralysis in us of not moving on, that we get fixated on the data and we keep saying we need more data, which then leads into, remember, the concept of systemic structures. These are the artifacts that are within the system. And so if you think about a school system, you're thinking about the policies that are in place. You're thinking about the design of the curriculum, thinking about the schedule. You're thinking about how people act within those different artifacts. Contracts within public school systems are important, or in universities, depending on what's there. Or if you're working in a private organization, if you're working in a company, think about the artifacts, the visible artifacts that shape the behavior of people over time. And then finally, the thing we talked about, which is a very important component, are, what are the assumptions that underlie all of these? But more importantly, what are the habits of actions? What are the habitual habits that we see taking place on a daily level that basically come about because of those system structures? So this is what I want you to think about as you go forward in looking at, one, how you want to entertain a possible dissertation and a problem around a dissertation. And two, more importantly, is how do I begin to carry these understandings into my daily operations? So that's what we were particularly focusing in on our activities in 800. So from that then, we moved into 625. And if you remember about 625, one of the most interesting components of this is this whole idea of conversation and how we interact with people. So at that first level, we talked about downloading and our habitual actions. And the concept of the visualization of that is me in the center, surrounded by my ideas or my thoughts or my organization. So what happens within this quadrant is I really don't hear much at all. Because anytime I'm hearing something, I'm always immediately downloading my perception, my assumptions, or my habitual action. And what this leads to then is, in terms of our discussion, and as we talked about this, is we have the tendency to smooth things over. We don't rock the boat. We're polite in our conversations. But really what's happening is that I basically have blinders on to other possibilities. So this is what basically happens at this level. And many times this is the type of activity, if you think about meetings that you're in within your organization, and think about the type of conversations that take place there, a lot of times this is really what's going on. Now, the second level that when we looked at this in 625 is really now we're moving into objective listening. And so if you remember, I now at least move to the edge of my thinking or the boundaries of my organization, because what happens now is really you begin to debate and clash between ideas. Look, I don't like this anymore. Nah, that's a crazy idea. And here's why. And I want you to think about this way because I want you to understand it. So we get into that because really what starts happening at this level is I start speaking out. I'm not going to take it anymore, if you remember the famous line. So think about the relationship of these. And also when Peter Senge talks about natural systems, that what you generally see is sort of we migrate between these two. So you get this from a mathematical point of view, a sigmoid activity where you might be in number one, but then you might move into number two, and then you might move back. So it's a natural process. We all do this. I'm sure you've debated and you've clashed with other people within conversations, within your groups, etc. So one of the things I asked the Philadelphia cohort is that when you were in your teams, did any of this happen? Was there any smoothing over? Was there a clash of ideas? Were there debates? Because you were working in a team, and the question is, as you were listening to this, did you say, no, I don't buy into this, I like this idea, or you just basically kept these things to yourself? So I think, from a practicality of what happened in 801, I'd like you to think about it from that point of view. And then as we move into that third level, empathetic listening. So symbolically, if we remember how Otto looked at that, is what now happens is I begin to move outside of my realities or my organization. And what now begins to happen is basically, who's saying it? How do I understand what's saying, what people are saying? And if you remember your activity in 625 of the interview, and how did you develop empathetic listening? And as many of you said, that's pretty hard to do. It's not really that easy. Some of you got there, some of you did not, some of you struggle with that, because what happens in this level is reflective connections. And again, if you begin to think about it from the realities, we do migrate between these. So we have objective listening, we have empathetic listening. And again, think about your teaming and your interactions within the teams, or any of the teams that you were involved in over the last 30 weeks. Did you migrate between objective listening and empathetic listening? And then the final level of listening that we talked about really is listening from the whole. And here, what really begins to happen is we begin to look for new patterns and connections. So this is what presencing and flow is about, that we collapse those boundaries and we listen from future self. What are we hoping to do? So if you think about a positive vision, you're constantly living in this idea of listening from the future self. So if you think about the activities you did in 801, one of the first areas that you were exposed to is looking at all of that data from the Wall Street Journal or from the Sachs material or other materials that you're looking at. You're trying to collectively, as a group, to begin to look at possibilities of what the future might be. And again, as you were doing that, though, from a personal point of view, you were dealing with your own downloading as it related to a school or a learning organization or a university. And so you were constantly interacting with those concepts. So again, this is what I want you to take away and think about as you look at these, because this is really where generative dialogue takes place. This is where the possibilities, if you remember some of the videos that you were watching, where you truly let go and you allow the possibilities, like, wow, I didn't think about this. And so if you think about brainstorming ideas, this is what it's about. So when you look at, again, this entire process, now let's put this on top of it. And this is how possibly thinking about the you and what the you is about. So the downloading, and then into objective listening, and then looking at a empathetic listening, and then as you start going up the right side of the you, that's where the generative dialogue, that's where we moved into 800 in relationship to that. So that's the concepts that I hope you are able to take away from this process. This is the intent, that when we put this EDD together, is that these core areas of learning are ones that really are designed to help you find out what the source of your leadership is about, and a deeper dive into who you are, utilizing the tools that you received in 800 and in 625, and then looking at the design thinking. So as you think about this process, and as I said, you look at systems thinking, theory U, and then this idea of design thinking, and then looking at the concept of an open mind, an open heart, and open will, what I want you to just think about is this final project from the idea parts the whole. And the first question I'd like you to think about is, what did you learn from the relationships among the content found in 800, 625, and 801? And I'll also add 802 and 804 into that. So I'd like you to ponder about that. And if you're still journaling and practicing that, and that's becoming part of your habit, take your journal and just sit down and reflect upon it, because I think it will help you greatly as you delve deeper into the research courses to begin to look for possible dissertation topics. So I think that becomes important. The second question I'd like you to deal with is, what did you learn from working in a team environment? What was that like over 30 weeks? Starting out in 800 when you were doing that, and your reading groups, and finally your design teams, the 5 design teams. So what did I learn from that? What does that help me to do? And what can I transfer into my own environment as a leader, as I work in that environment? And then the next question I would like you to think about is, what did you learn about yourself in this project? What were your blind spots? What were the concepts that surprised you about yourself as you interacted with your colleagues, as you worked with the information, as you explored the challenge that was put out in front of you? So I think these, from my point of view, are extremely important for you to reflect upon going forward. Because as I said to you a while back, I don't want these courses to be separate entities that, okay, I passed 800, I passed 625, 801, now I can move on, forget about that. No, I want you to constantly keep thinking about these particular ideas. And then really what I want then to end up is with this, because I want you to think about this and enjoy your future. And what to me is important as the facilitator of the spaces of learning that I created for you, that you develop a sense of possibilities about the future. And the way in which I ended Saturday was with this video clip. And I just want to share this with you and say that it was a great pleasure working with all of you this quarter. And I hope in the future that we can interact again. So here is the ending clip that I would like to share with you.
What is the most astounding fact you can share with us about the universe?
The most astounding fact is the knowledge that the atoms that comprise life on Earth, the atoms that make up the human body, are traceable to the crucibles that cooked light elements into heavy elements in their core under extreme temperatures and pressures. These stars, the high mass ones among them, went unstable in their later years. They collapsed and then exploded, scattering their enriched guts across the galaxy. Guts made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and all the fundamental ingredients of life itself. These ingredients become part of gas clouds that condense, collapse, form the next generation of solar systems, stars with orbiting planets. And those planets now have the ingredients for life itself. So that when I look up at the night sky, and I know that, yes, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. When I reflect on that fact, I look up. Many people feel small because they're small and the universe is big, but I feel big because my atoms came from those stars. There's a level of connectivity. That's really what you want in life. You want to feel connected. You want to feel relevant. You want to feel like you're a participant in the goings-on of activities and events around you. That's precisely what we are, just by being alive.
So I want to wish all of you a great future. And I hope in a small way I was able to contribute to your development as a great leader.